Psalm 121 lifts your eyes without denying the climb. Psalm 121 begins with a question spoken beneath something larger than the person asking it. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? The hills are not explained, whether they look beautiful, threatening, distant, familiar, or steep is left unstated. The text gives us something more important. A worshiper who sees what is in front of him and asks where help will come from. Then the answer shifts the scale of the scene. My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. The eyes have lifted toward the hills, but the hills are not the source of help. The one named in the answer is not another part of the landscape. He is the maker of the landscape, the sky above it, and the ground beneath the traveler's feet. That distinction is the beginning of Psalm 121, but it is not yet the whole song. The psalm will repeat one family of words again and again. Keep, keeps, keeper. The worshiper begins by asking about help. By the end, the whole journey has been placed inside the keeping of God. Foot, day, night, life, going out, coming in, now, and forevermore. The psalm speaks to a body that can lose its footing, a traveler exposed to day and night, a life that still goes out and comes in. Yet as the song unfolds, the traveler becomes less and less central to the security of the journey. The Lord becomes the repeated subject. He made, He keeps, He does not sleep, He stays near, He keeps the life, He keeps the going out and the coming in. The hills are still there when the psalm ends. What has changed is the frame around them. The hills raise the question, but they cannot answer it. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? Psalm 121 belongs to the Songs of Ascents, a small collection within the Psalms associated with going up. Readers have often connected these songs with pilgrims traveling toward Jerusalem, and that association fits the language of ascent. Still, the psalm itself gives too little detail to reconstruct one exact road, one exact traveler, or one exact danger hidden beyond the ridge. That restraint matters. We do not need to invent a scene in order to hear the tension already present in the text. A person looks outward and upward. Something visible fills the horizon. Then a question rises. Where does help come from? The answer is immediate and precise. My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. The worshiper keeps the hills in view while learning to distinguish between what he sees and the one from whom help comes. That is a deeper movement than simple optimism. A visible thing can tell us something real without possessing the authority to tell us everything. A steep road can tell a traveler that strength will be required. It cannot tell him who made the earth beneath that road. A threatening circumstance can expose human limits. It cannot reduce the Lord to those limits. A future we cannot control can reveal how dependent we are. It cannot become the source of the help dependence needs. The opening of Psalm 121 therefore begins with an act of theological proportion. The hills are large, but they are created. The Lord is not introduced as one more power beside the hill, one more resource to add to the traveler's own strength, or one more possibility inside an uncertain world. He made heaven and earth. The sentence places the entire visible setting inside his authorship. This is why lifting the eyes should not be turned into a spiritual technique. The upward glance has no power by itself. A person can stare at the horizon and remain afraid. The decisive movement comes in the confession that follows. My help comes from the Lord. Help is located before the road is explained. That order protects the psalm from becoming a promise that faith will make every path understandable. Nothing in these opening verses tells the traveler how long the journey will take, which difficulty will disappear, or what the next bend will contain. The worshiper receives no map. He receives a name, the Lord, and then a description large enough to keep the hills from becoming ultimate. Maker of heaven and earth. The road may still rise, the worshiper may still have questions that the psalm never answers, but the first question has been answered at a deeper level than the terrain can reach. Mastery of the landscape is not the source of help, It comes from the Lord who made it. The song moves from my help to your keeper. The first two verses are spoken in the first person. I lift up my eyes. My help comes from the Lord. Then the grammar changes. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. The identity of the speaker is left open. The words may function as a liturgical response, a blessing, or a poetic shift in address. What matters for the movement of the song is clear. The worshiper who began with his own confession is now being addressed. Your foot, your keeper, your shade, your life, your going out, your coming in. The effect is subtle but important. Faith is no longer carried only by what the traveler can say to himself. The language of the psalm surrounds him with assurance. That matters because fear can become self-enclosed. Under pressure, a person may feel responsible not only for surviving the difficulty, but also for producing enough confidence to face it. If the heart trembles, then even faith begins to feel like another task to perform correctly. Psalm 121 interrupts that isolation. The traveler speaks, and then the song speaks to the traveler. He will not let your foot be moved. The image belongs naturally to movement. A journey happens through contact with the ground. The foot bears weight, finds balance, adjusts to uneven places, and carries the body forward. The psalm places the language of keeping at that point of vulnerability. Then the horizon widens again. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The God who keeps this traveler is the keeper of Israel. The verse even begins with an attention word, behold. The song asks the hearer to notice what fear easily overlooks. The traveler's immediate concern may be one foot on one road, but the keeping of God has never been confined to that single moment. Israel's story gives the personal promise a communal horizon. The worshiper is not discovering a private deity who appeared only because this journey became difficult. He is calling upon the Lord already known as the keeper of his people. The individual has not disappeared, but he has been placed inside a larger people and a larger history of divine faithfulness. The journey is personal without becoming private. The same Lord addressed as my help is named as the one who keeps Israel. This protects the psalm from becoming a celebration of private spiritual confidence. The traveler is not being told that his faith is strong enough to secure him. In fact, the repeated subject of the psalm moves in the opposite direction. The text keeps drawing attention away from the traveler's ability and toward the Lord's action. He keeps. The repetition works almost like a hand placed again and again on the same truth. Each return gathers another part of the journey until the promise has widened around the whole traveler. The worshiper's task is not to become his own keeper. That truth becomes especially clear in the next line, because the first quality named about the keeper is one no human traveler can imitate for long. He does not sleep. The keeper's vigilance is not borrowed from yours. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. A traveler can stay alert for a while. A guard can take a watch. A worried person can spend a night listening for every sound. But human attention has an edge. Bodies tire, eyes close, concentration breaks. Fear may keep a person awake longer than wisdom would choose. But even fear cannot make someone endlessly vigilant. Psalm 121 places the worshiper's security somewhere else. The keeper does not slumber. The statement is simple, yet it changes the emotional architecture of the song. The traveler has already admitted need by asking where help comes from. Now another burden is lifted. The future of the journey is not suspended on the traveler's perfect awareness of every possible threat. This is one reason the repeated word keep matters so much. The psalm is not mainly praising the worshiper's ability to hold on. It praises the Lord's capacity to keep. There is a difference between those two centers. When fear becomes intense, we often attempt to keep ourselves by increasing vigilance. We rehearse conversations before they happen. We imagine every possible failure. We scan for signs that something has changed. We tell ourselves that if we remain alert enough, nothing will catch us unprepared. Some forms of attentiveness are wise. Scripture honors watchfulness and prudence, yet vigilance can cross a line and begin trying to do the work of sovereignty. Psalm 121 draws a boundary there. You are not the one who never sleeps. The Lord is. The point is not that faithful people will always feel rested, or that anxiety disappears when the verse is repeated. The psalm is making a claim about God before it makes any claim about our emotional state. His attention is not measured by ours. The traveler's exhaustion never becomes a weakness in the keeper. The night therefore loses one of its most frightening powers. Darkness can hide the next step from the traveler. It cannot hide the traveler from the keeper. That is why the movement from my help to he who keeps Israel matters. The psalm is steadily relocating confidence. It began with a person looking outward. It now asks that person to rest the weight of the journey on divine vigilance rather than human endurance. The Lord remains faithful while the traveler sleeps. Before the psalm speaks of shade, sun, moon, or evil, it establishes this foundation. The keeper is never off watch. The Creator is described at the traveler's right hand. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The song has already named God as maker of heaven and earth and keeper of Israel. Those titles are vast. They can fill the imagination with distance, greatness, and authority. Then Psalm 121 uses the language of proximity, shade at your right hand. The Creator is not only above the landscape, the keeper is described beside the traveler. Shade is a remarkably ordinary image after heaven and earth. It belongs to the experience of being exposed. A person under heat needs no theory about the sun. The body knows exposure directly. Shade matters because the traveler is still within the conditions of the journey. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Day and night now enter the song as a pair. The poem has moved from hills to foot, from foot to sleepless keeping, and from sleepless keeping to the full cycle through which a journey passes. The language is comprehensive. Day remains within the Lord's keeping, and night never opens a second world outside his care. We should resist the temptation to turn these lines into a technical promise that a believer will never experience physical harm under sun, night, weather, illness, accident, or human violence. The psalm is poetry of trust, not a schedule of which painful events God will prevent. Its own language is larger than such a mechanical reading. The point is the scope of the keeper's care. The Lord who made heaven and earth is near enough to be called shade. The Lord who keeps Israel is near enough to be named at the traveler's right hand. This changes the way the poem speaks about help. Help is not reduced to removal. At times, help takes the form of removal. Scripture contains rescues, opened roads, defeated enemies, healed bodies, and dangers escaped. Psalm 121, however, organizes its assurance around another image, keeping. The traveler is still traveling. The day still passes. Night still comes. What surrounds those movements is the presence of the keeper. That gives the psalm a form of assurance that is both stronger and less controllable than a promise of convenience. If God's care were measured only by whether the road became easier, the traveler would need to interpret every hard mile as evidence that help had failed. Psalm 121 refuses to make ease the measure. The song gives us something else to notice. Who is near? Who keeps? Who remains awake through both halves of the day? The answer is the same Lord who made heaven and earth. The Creator has come close in the language of the poem, not to erase the journey, but to keep the traveler within it. The Lord will keep you from all evil, must be read with the whole psalm. Then Psalm 121 reaches its strongest language. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. This is the point where shallow reassurance becomes dangerous. If these words are treated as a guarantee that no serious suffering will reach a faithful person, the rest of Scripture becomes impossible to explain honestly. Israel knew exile, violence, grief, and death. The prophets suffered. The apostles were persecuted. Jesus did not teach his followers to expect a life untouched by pain. Yet we should not solve that tension by weakening the verse until it says almost nothing. The psalm really does speak comprehensively. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The task is to let those words retain their strength, while refusing to make them promise more than Scripture allows us to predict. The safest place to begin is the psalm itself. From verse 3 onward, the same action has been repeated in different forms. The Lord keeps the foot. The Lord keeps Israel. The Lord is the traveler's keeper. The Lord keeps through day and night. Now the language reaches the life itself. The movement is not from small danger to a list of larger dangers that God promises to prevent one by one. It is from the traveler's vulnerable step toward the comprehensive claim of divine keeping over the whole person. That is why the next verse matters so much. Psalm 121 gives the worshiper confidence in the keeper, without giving the worshiper control over the form that keeping will take in every circumstance. That distinction is necessary. There will be times when a person prays for protection and is spared something they feared. Gratitude is right. There will also be times when suffering arrives despite faithful prayer. Psalm 121 should never be used to accuse the sufferer of lacking faith, to explain an unexplained tragedy, or to promise that the next danger cannot touch the body. The absence of every wound is therefore a poor measure of the divine care celebrated here. It teaches us to place the whole life beneath the Lord's keeping. For Christians, the wider witness of Scripture makes that confidence deeper rather than easier. Following Christ leaves suffering on the road. The gospel centers on a Lord who passed through suffering and death, not around them. Christian hope, therefore, cannot mean that every faithful life will be preserved from every painful event in the present age. But neither does suffering gain the right to cancel the keeping of God. His care is larger than the moment we can measure. His claim over the life reaches farther than the danger immediately visible. Psalm 121 leaves unexplained how every painful chapter fits inside that care. It gives us worship language strong enough to keep trusting the keeper when the chapter is still unfinished. That is more demanding than a formula and more durable than one. No method for staying untouched appears in the song. It gives the traveler a God whose keeping reaches the life itself. The final promise encloses the journey. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. The psalm ends with ordinary verbs: going out, coming in. After hills, heaven, earth, sun, moon, and evil, the final line comes back to movements almost too common to notice. A person leaves. A person returns. A day begins. A task takes someone beyond the doorway. Another movement brings them home. The phrase gathers the whole course of life into the blessing. A doorway is less dramatic than a mountain, yet the final verse chooses the doorway rhythm of ordinary existence. The blessing reaches the movements repeated so often that they can disappear from attention. Leaving, returning, beginning again, carrying responsibility into another day. Divine keeping is not reserved for the moments that feel visibly spiritual or dangerous. That is where the architecture of Psalm 121 becomes clearest. The opening scene is narrow. One person, one pair of eyes, one horizon, one question. The ending is expansive. Every going out, every coming in, this time forevermore. Between those 2 points, the repeated language of keeping keeps widening the frame. The Lord keeps the foot. The Lord keeps Israel. The Lord is the keeper at the right hand. The Lord keeps through day and night. The Lord keeps the life. The Lord keeps the whole rhythm of departure and return. The psalm therefore reaches beyond reassurance about one dangerous section of road. It teaches the worshiper to understand the journey itself beneath the active keeping of God. That is more specific than the broad statement, God is with you in hard times. Psalm 121 builds confidence through a repeated verb, rather than a general feeling of nearness. The Lord's relationship to the traveler is described again and again as keeping. The worshiper begins by asking where help comes from, because the landscape is what the eyes can see. By the end, the landscape has been placed inside a larger grammar. Your foot is kept. Your day and night are kept. Your life is kept. Your going out and coming in are kept. Every interruption within those movements remains unexplained. It never tells us that every going out will unfold as planned, that every coming in will happen on the schedule we hoped for, or that every road will return us to the same life we left. Its assurance rests elsewhere. The keeper is not temporary. From this time forth and forevermore, the traveler's movement changes. The Lord's keeping outlasts every change of scenery. This is why the title of the psalm can hold both lifting and climbing together. The eyes rise because the road alone cannot supply the answer to the question of help. Then the eyes come back to a life that still has to move. Psalm 121 trains the worshiper to move attention beyond the hills toward the one whose keeping encloses the journey from its vulnerable first step to its final horizon. The journey is smaller than the keeping. Psalm 121 begins with hills because the eyes need somewhere to rest. It ends with forevermore because the hills were never large enough to contain the promise. The worshiper asks, "From where does my help come?" And the answer names the maker of heaven and earth. From there, the song keeps narrowing God's care toward the traveler and widening its reach around the traveler at the same time. The Creator is the keeper. The keeper of Israel does not sleep. The one who rules heaven and earth is shade at the right hand. His keeping reaches day and night, the life itself, every going out and coming in, this time and forevermore. Nothing in the psalm requires us to pretend the road is level. Its language assumes vulnerability strongly enough to speak of a foot needing to be kept and a life needing preservation. But the final emphasis no longer rests on the height of the hills. It rests on the reach of the keeper. So when Psalm 121 lifts the eyes, it is not teaching escape from the climb, it is teaching proportion. The hill belongs to creation. The journey belongs inside a life that is kept. And the one who keeps is the Lord who made heaven and earth.